Bueno, buenas tardes a todos, es mucho gusto. Soy el doctor Abel Feinstein de la Asociación Psicoanalítica Argentina. Es un placer enorme poder hacer esta actividad junto con la Sociedad Psicoanalítica de Porto Alegre. Tenemos como invitado especial a un amigo, colega, el doctor Kerry Sulkowicz, a quien voy a presentar en un ratito. Vamos a hacer unas pequeñas palabras de bienvenida a cargo de los presidentes de la Sociedad Psicoanalítica Argentina, de la Asociación Psicoanalítica Argentina y de la Sociedad de Porto Alegre, y comenzamos con la actividad. Sí.
Good evening, everyone. We are very pleased to introduce Dr. Kerry Sulkowicz. We are here together with the Argentine Psychoanalytical Association and the Society of Porto Alegre to organize this activity. And then Claudia is going to say a few words, the president of the Argentine Psychoanalytical Association.
Bueno, bienvenidos a todos. Entiendo que la presentación de Kerry quedará en un rato en manos de Abel. Bienvenido, Kerry. Esta es una presentación multilingüística, interregional. Tenemos, aunque vamos a manejar dos idiomas oficiales, que son el portuñol, un poco de español también, y inglés. Porque Kerry no habla ni portuñol ni español.
This is well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. This is a multilinguistic and interregional activity, although there's going to be two official languages, which are English and Portuñol. That is a mixture of Spanish and Portuguese.
Hay colegas, bueno, de Brasil, por supuesto, distinguidos colegas de Brasil, colegas de Argentina, y bueno, y el doctor Kerry, que ahora va a ser Sulkowicz, que pronto va a ser presentado, y con estas palabras doy la bienvenida a una actividad que va a ser intensa y ajedrecística.
Well, now she's just saying welcome to everybody, and she's going to give the word to the other presenters.
José Carlos.
Muy buenas tardes. Yo voy a hablar en portuñol, entonces, pero en un portuñol fluido, y quería también dar las bienvenidas a todos que nos están escuchando y decir que es un placer tener al doctor Kerry Sulkowicz con nosotros acá y discutir cosas tan diferentes de que estamos acostumbrados a discutir y conocer también todo lo que eso significa dentro del mundo.
Bueno, he's also very pleased. He's also very pleased to have you here and to be able to discuss questions and issues that are not really often discussed in our societies.
También quería agradecer a Abel y a Sergio y a Claudio que en verdad fueron los que realmente organizaron ese encuentro. Muchas gracias y vamos al trabajo.
He wants to thank the presidents of the associations who were the really organizers of the activity.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Esta actividad la hemos organizado, como dijo José Carlos, con Sergio Leucovich y Claudio Eseric de la Sociedad de Porto Alegre. Con Sergio Leucovich compartimos con Kerry un trabajo en la IPA y nos pareció muy interesante, como dijo José Carlos, de invitarlo a conversar con nosotros de un tema que no es frecuente que conversemos.
Bueno, Abel and Sergio Leucovich share with you a space in the IPA, and so they thought it interesting to discuss some sort of work which is not often discussed in our societies.
Gracias. Les voy a presentar brevemente al doctor Kerry Sulkowicz. El doctor Kerry Sulkowicz es psicoanalista, presidente recientemente de la Asociación Psicoanalítica Americana, graduado en Harvard College y en la Universidad de Texas. Ha sido residente y jefe de residentes en la Universidad de Nueva York y en el Hospital Bellevue en Nueva York, en psiquiatría. Y actualmente es profesor en psiquiatría en la Universidad de Nueva York, en la Escuela de Medicina, y ha sido distinguido con el Distinguished Teacher Award otorga esa universidad. El doctor Kerry trabaja habitualmente como consultor de reconocidos políticos y CEOs corporativos. Ese es su trabajo básicamente en este momento. Y además es columnista en distintos diarios y revistas de distintas partes del mundo. El doctor Kerry ha recibido el premio Edith Sapshin Teacher Award, que otorga la Asociación Psicoanalítica, y también ha recibido condecoraciones por ser un apasionado defensor de los derechos humanos. El doctor Kerry es past chair de Decisions for Human Rights, es una organización que fue premiada, que ha compartido el Premio Nobel de la Paz en alguna ocasión anterior. Quizá, Analía, si podés decir algo de esto para Kerry.
Sí. Well, Abel has just presented you. He said what universities you graduated from and prizes that you received. That you are the past chair of human rights, of Physicians for Human Rights, which shared the Nobel Prize a couple of years ago, I suppose. And bueno, the rest of the things I suppose that you are a consultant for CEOs and that you work for different business companies in different countries.
Vamos a escuchar unas palabras de Mirta Goldstein, que es la secretaria científica de la APA y la que coordina el grupo de debates que organizamos en APA Esto.
Buenos días a todos. ¿Me escuchan? Sí. Bienvenidos. No voy a reiterar todos los saludos. Les mando un beso cariñoso a todos, virtual. Quiero agradecer al equipo de traductores, nuestros colegas y amigos, Jorge, y Kateli y Analía Wall, a todos los que hicieron el enlace, a nuestros compañeros del grupo debates, que hemos tomado el tema de liderazgo como un tema de actualidad. La pregunta, ¿qué elegimos? Okay.
She's going to speak in representation of a group called Debates. It's a group in the APA, and they are discussing the issue of leadership. They've been discussing it since this activity was organized, and now she's going to pose some of the issues they've been discussing.
Estaba diciendo que la pregunta, ¿qué elegimos cuando elegimos?, involucra tanto a los pueblos y a sus líderes, al movimiento psicoanalítico y también a cada analista en cada proceso analítico que lleva adelante. Es por eso que estamos...
Bueno, wait. She's saying that the question of what we choose and how we choose is a very important question with respect to peoples, with respect to the analytic movement, and with respect of each analytical process that we lead.
Por eso es que nos es tan importante y de tanta actualidad el material que hemos recibido de Kerry, que vamos a seguir trabajando y que vamos a llevar a nuestro simposio, al cual están todos invitados, a nuestro simposio entre el 10 y el 21 de noviembre.
That's why it is such an important issue, and it's going to be taken to the APA symposium at the end of the year.
Muchas gracias por participar y quiero nuevamente agradecerles porque para nosotros tomar estos temas dentro de la institución psicoanalítica es de suma actualidad y de necesidad. Muchas gracias por estar.
She wants to thank you because she believes that these questions are very important in all psychoanalytical institutions and particularly ours.
Muchas gracias, Mirta. Bueno, vamos a escuchar a nuestro invitado, Kerry.
Well, now it's your turn, Kerry.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very, very much for inviting me to speak with you today. So first of all, thank you to my friends Abel and Sergio and to all of you for inviting me to speak to you today and for the opportunity to have a conversation. I have a number of things that I'd like to say to you, but I don't want to just be the main one talking. I'd like to have a conversation with you about some
Bueno,
of these issues.
Kerry agradece mucho toda la invitación y que le gustaría que esto fuera un diálogo y que no esté él solo planteando estos temas.
Thank you. I'm actually seeing if I can find a better microphone, but so let me start by taking the liberty of telling you a little bit more about myself, if that's okay, just to put some of my comments and some of my interest in leadership into some more personal context.
Bueno, él quiere empezar para hablar un poco de sí mismo, para poner su interés en las cuestiones de liderazgo en contexto.
Okay, thank you. So everything that Abel was nice enough to say about me, I appreciate that. It's true. But let me give you a little bit more of the personal story.
Quiere, todo lo que se dijo hasta ahora es cierto, pero quiere un poquito más de su historia personal.
I am the only child of two survivors of the concentration camp in Poland. My parents, who are long gone, survived Auschwitz and Ravensbrück and immigrated after the Second World War to the United States and ended up in Dallas, Texas.
Bueno, es el único hijo de un matrimonio de sobrevivientes de campos de concentración, de Auschwitz y de Ravensbrück, y que emigraron después de la Segunda Guerra Mundial a Dallas, Texas, y ahora llevan ya muchos años fallecidos.
Okay. So as a child, I was reading books about leaders, political leaders especially, and I had an interest in the question of how did leaders of countries do good and bad things.
Se me ocurría que mientras tanto, entre nosotros ya podemos situar con sus poquitas palabras lo que su discurso, ¿no? Sobreviviente único hijo de sobrevivientes del Holocausto, ya nos sitúa en una época, en una tradición, en una historia personal y social. Me parece que esto ya es muy importante.
I'm so sorry about the connection problem. Should we try to continue?
Yes, we stopped where you explained that when you were a little child, you read books about leadership.
Okay. If I continue to speak at this rate, we're not going to make it past my childhood. So.
Dice que si sigue hablando a esta velocidad no va a pasar mucho de su infancia.
So, what I'm trying to say is that I had a long interest in leadership that began as an emotional interest, not as an intellectual interest. And, but in many ways, this was the beginning of my path to becoming a psychoanalyst and somebody who focused on leadership.
Dice que lo que él quiere contar es que su interés fue primeramente emocional, más que intelectual, y que esto fue lo que después lo llevó a ser un psicoanalista.
Okay. As you know, I trained as a psychiatrist and as a psychoanalyst, and I thought that I was going to spend my whole career seeing patients.
I continue because we have also problems of connection. Kerry, I don't see you. Well, now, yes. Bueno, que lo que quiso decir, digamos, es que su interés original para comenzar, incluso para ser psicoanalista, fue emocional.
Thanks.
No solo en estos temas, sino para ser psicoanalista. Yes, you can continue, please.
Okay. After I finished my training, I started to practice and was seeing patients all day. I also became a training and supervising analyst in New York. And after about 5 or 6 years full-time as a training analyst, I found that I was unhappy. And I liked seeing patients, I like helping people, I like the intellectual aspects of psychoanalysis, but I found that I was restless. And
Lo que dice...
Go ahead.
Yes, please,
No,
continue.
go.
I get the whole of your idea.
Okay. So when in the early 90s, when the internet was getting started, in the early startup world, I started an internet business and it was a failure. But I learned a lot and I found that I had an entrepreneurial bug in me.
Okay, now yes. Lo que dice Kerry es que, bueno, después de hacer su training y de convertirse en un analista, un training analyst y un analista didáctico, trabajó durante unos 5 años aproximadamente en esto, atendiendo pacientes en forma individual, pero se sentía infeliz y inquieto. Entonces sentía que no era suficiente para él y comenzó en los años 90 un emprendimiento, digamos, a través de Internet que lo llevó un poco por los caminos empresariales. El emprendimiento fue un fracaso, pero bueno, ese fue su inicio empresarial. Yes, please, continue.
So after my first failure in business, I felt an urge to try again, and I had a different idea, which was wanted to know if there was a way to apply a psychoanalytic understanding of the behavior of individuals and of groups to leaders, and particularly to business leaders and political leaders. And I talked to a few of my psychoanalytic teachers in New York, and they basically told me that I was crazy and that it was a terrible idea. But that didn't stop me. And so I started a consulting practice called the Boswell Group, which was named after my dog, Boswell, and got some early clients, some CEOs who told me that they were lonely in their role as a leader and that they really needed someone to talk to. I'll stop there.
Bueno,
If you want to translate.
Después de haber tenido un fracaso, digamos, desde el punto de vista del negocio de Internet, intentó por otro camino y consultó un poco con sus colegas respecto de hacer un trabajo que tuviera que ver más con el acercamiento a los líderes y de las empresas. Todos le dijeron que era una locura, pero eso, sin embargo, no lo frenó y entonces creó una especie de, no sé si de institución, lo que dijo, ¿no? Algo así, que con el nombre de su perro, que creo que era... lo dijo en inglés, el nombre del perro, digamos, que le puso a el grupo o la institución que él creó para empezar a conectarse con los líderes, que captó esencialmente que el problema esencial que ellos tenían era la soledad.
Thank you. One of the early conversations that I had with a leader was a conversation in which he told me that he had 3 problems. One problem was that he had never been a leader before, and just because he had the title of a leader didn't mean that he knew how to live the role. The second problem that he had was that he had started an organization with 2 friends, but he became the leader, and once he became the leader, he said, I'm the same person, but they don't treat me the same way anymore. In other words, the dynamics of the relationship had changed. And the third challenge that he had was that he said that he thought it would be helpful if he knew more about how the human mind works, because being a leader involved an understanding of human behavior. And I heard those things as an opportunity.
La primera conversación que Kerry tuvo con un líder descubrió que había tres problemas, según lo que le decía este líder, tres problemas fundamentales. Uno era que nunca había sido un líder, entonces no tenía la menor idea de cómo serlo. La segunda es que al ser líder y compartir, digamos, en las tareas con colegas con los que antes había compartido las tareas, pero no en ese rol, notó que sus vínculos habían cambiado, que la forma en que se manejaban los vínculos habían cambiado. Y finalmente, y lo que le importaba mucho, era tratar de entender y de conocer cómo funcionaba la mente de las personas que él lideraba para poder ejercer mejor su rol, y eso fue lo que fundamentalmente le pidió a Kerry.
I saw that as an opportunity, and I was reminded of a book by Freud that I had read when I was a psychoanalytic candidate. I had read in The Question of Lay Analysis, Freud talked about how he envisioned a future of psychoanalysis in which there were many applications of psychoanalysis, clinical work being one application, but many others. He didn't say anything about business, but he talked about the application of psychoanalysis to education and to the arts and to anthropology. And he saw the future of the profession of psychoanalysis at some time being dependent on these other applications, that these other applications might be important to the field. And Freud's idea was an inspiration to me at that time, especially when some of my contemporary psychoanalysts were raising questions about whether or not what I was doing was really psychoanalysis.
Bueno, Kerry dice que esto él lo vio como una oportunidad y fundamentalmente, habiendo leído el texto de Freud sobre análisis Lego, en donde Freud le da muchísima importancia al desarrollo del análisis aplicado en cuanto al futuro del psicoanálisis, en la educación, en la cantidad, en el arte, en las leyes, es decir, le dio muchísima importancia a esto, y él también lo tomó como algo inspirador el hecho de que pudiera ser aplicado también al psicoanálisis, al área empresarial o de los negocios, business en concreto, ¿no? Ahí vio entonces Kerry una posibilidad muy importante para el futuro, para el desarrollo del psicoanálisis.
So I'm going to go a little faster in terms of what I've been doing, and then we will get to the current topic. But sorry, wait until the noise stops. In the early days, I really was learning with each client that I got how to be an advisor to leaders. And it's very different than working with a patient where there's absolute confidentiality. In traditional clinical psychoanalysis, there's a private confidential relationship between the psychoanalyst and the patient. In working with a leader of an organization, one of the things that was a big change for me was the idea that I was working with leaders, but the client was the entire organization. And so I was talking not only with the CEO, but also with the members of the board of directors and the management team. Let me stop there.
Ok. Kerry se dio cuenta de la enorme diferencia que había entre tratar a un paciente privadamente y convertirse en un consejero, en un advisor de una organización, la diferencia entre hablar privadamente con alguien y convertirse en consejero de una organización en donde la conversación y la persona, el CEO, lo ponía en contacto con una enorme cantidad de personas de toda la organización. Se convertía en una especie de conversación múltiple con mucha gente, no solo por él mismo, sino por los contactos en los que tenía que intervenir.
Yeah. One of the most surprising experiences for me, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Now it's echoing. I'm hearing myself. Sorry, we're having so many problems. One of the...
It's not working. Bothering you. It's bothering you?
It's having an echo. Let me turn off the microphone and turn it back on.
Okay.
Can you hear me now? I think that's better.
Yes.
Okay. One of the most surprising things that I learned early on, I'm talking about 25 years ago when I was first getting started, is that I used to worry that that business leaders and political leaders that I was talking to would hear that I was a psychoanalyst and that they would run away, that they would be afraid to talk to somebody like me. What I learned was exactly the opposite, that people in leadership roles are so isolated, they are often so anxious, they often deal with so many complicated, ambiguous, uncertain issues that they were starved for the opportunity to talk to someone with a psychoanalytic background and a psychoanalytic way of listening.
Bueno, lo sorprendente para Kerry fue que hace 25 años, cuando comenzó a trabajar en esto, creyó que los CEOs de las organizaciones con los que trataba iban a huir despavoridos pensando que él era un psicoanalista, que no les iba a interesar hablar con un psicoanalista. Pero fue exactamente lo contrario. Ellos estaban tan solos, tan aislados, digamos, en realidad, que su necesidad de contactarse con otros y compartir su problema como líder era muy importante, digamos. Entonces, esto fue algo que él descubrió en este comienzo.
Another thing that I learned is that everybody is interested in leadership, right? Leadership is a very popular idea because of business leaders, because of political leaders, and there's a natural human interest in leadership. Most people are not leaders, most people are followers. Leaders are not leaders without having followers, and one of the most useful definitions of leadership that I learned is that leadership is the capacity to inspire followership.
Bueno, es interesante esto que dice que todo el mundo está interesado en el tema del liderazgo y todos quieren saber acerca de lo que es el liderazgo, pero no muchas personas son líderes. Una gran cantidad de personas son más que líderes, son seguidores, pero son tan importantes como el líder, porque lo importante, digamos, no existe un líder sin seguidores, y lo importante es ese vínculo que se crea entre los líderes y los seguidores.
Claudia.
If you want to continue,
okay,
I'm okay.
So another thing that I learned about leadership early on, and I'm a student of leadership, and I've also been a leader of different organizations myself. If you go to the bookstore, any bookstore, there's a big shelf of books on leadership. There's a new book every day about leadership. And I don't know if any of you have read these books. Most of them are not very good. They are usually in 2 or 3 types. One is a kind of narcissistic book by a successful business leader who then writes a book to tell everybody else how to be a leader. Other books on leadership are about 5 easy steps to becoming an effective leader. And those are what most of the books about leadership are about. And what I found is that they all miss something essential about leadership, which is what I think a psychoanalytic perspective on leadership can bring. Maybe you can say that and then I'll explain what I mean.
Ok, bueno, en realidad Kerry se considera, digamos, un estudiante del tema del liderazgo y ha leído una enorme cantidad de libros. De hecho, si cualquiera de nosotros va a una librería va a encontrar millones de libros sobre liderazgo y en realidad la mayoría de ellos son bastante malos porque fundamentalmente se dirigen a 2 tipos de cuestiones. Uno, los líderes que narcisísticamente escriben sobre cómo ser un líder según su propia experiencia de liderazgo, y el otro porque enunciona tips básicos para llegar a ser un líder, 5 tips básicos para llegar a ser un buen líder. Y básicamente lo que está faltando es otro tipo de visión, que es la que Kerry, psicoanalítica, que es la que Kerry va a explicar ahora.
Thank you. So what I try to do in my work with leaders, as well as in my teaching about leadership, is to bring a distinctly psychoanalytic point of view to the question of leadership. So let me give you an example. The popular books on leadership say that the best way to become a leader is to read a book about leadership or to take a class on leadership in school. In my experience, while those classes can be interesting and useful, and I'm a big believer in going to school, the best leaders that I know and the best leaders that I have learned about, they didn't become leaders by reading a book about leadership. They became leaders as an adaptation to childhood trauma of a very specific kind. And that's a distinctly psychoanalytic perspective on leadership. The notion that leadership is an adaptation to a certain kind of trauma. And I'll say a little bit more about what I think that is.
Ok, en general el punto de vista de que se puede llegar a ser un buen líder leyendo libros o yendo a clases, bueno, es un punto de vista parcial, digamos. Se puede obviamente leer libros e ir a clases, pero no está en la esencia de lo que es convertirse en un líder. Convertirse en un líder, y los mejores líderes, según Kerry lo ha visto, es aquel que puede adaptarse de alguna manera a un trauma que él ha sufrido en su vida y que lo convierte en un líder. Y ahora va a explicar en parte qué significa esto del trauma, en cuya adaptación él puede convertirse en un buen líder.
Thank you. Of course, every leader has a unique childhood like the rest of us. But one of the common stories that I have seen in my work with leaders has been that many leaders have lost a parent early on or have had a parent with a mental illness or some kind of trauma themselves. And while most children, as everyone on this call knows, while most children who have parents who've had a mental illness or who have been lost through death or divorce suffer all kinds of psychological problems as a result of that, a small group of children respond to that kind of early loss or deprivation by stepping into a precocious parental role early on. They become parents in their home when they're children.
Lo que distingue, digamos, a esta capacidad en cierto sentido innata de algunos niños, no de todos, que han sufrido, que han padecido traumas tempranos, pérdidas, divorcios, enfermedad mental de los padres, deficiencias, digamos, en la función de los roles, es que algunos de estos niños han muy precozmente adoptado roles paternos en sus vidas y se han convertido muy tempranamente en pequeños líderes, digamos, asumiendo funciones paternales.
Yeah. There are narcissistic injuries in children, of course, who have experienced these kinds of early losses. And one of the other things that I talk about in my work with leaders is the spectrum of narcissism. On one end of the spectrum, because we all know that narcissism exists in all of us in various ways. It's not something that you either have it or you don't have it. It takes many different forms. And on one end of the narcissistic spectrum are the most pathological narcissists who have very little or no capacity for empathy, very little ability to tolerate frustration. And those kinds of narcissistic people make very poor leaders. But there's a kind of healthy narcissistic adaptation in which people who take pride in their accomplishments, in the way they appear, who take pride in being in front of a lot of other people and influencing large groups, that is a narcissistic adaptation that I would argue is a more healthy one. And some of the best leaders have that kind of narcissism.
Bueno, obviamente todas estas personas han sufrido, digamos, injurias narcisísticas, pero hay un espectro muy amplio del narcisismo. En un extremo del espectro narcisístico está el narcisismo patológico de personas que no tienen empatía, que no toleran frustraciones, y en ese caso esas personas tienen muy poca capacidad de ser líderes. Lo que hace buenos líderes es exactamente el otro extremo, que él llamaría de un narcisismo saludable, en donde la adaptación resulta en estar orgulloso de logros, en donde el objetivo mayor es entender y ayudar a otras personas y conectarse de la mejor manera con los otros, ¿no? Es un narcisismo saludable.
Thank you. I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and we can come back to any of these topics in the discussion, but I want to make a few other points about the work with leaders. And then I'd like to say a few words about my own experience as a leader, and then we can open it for discussion. Is that all right?
Yes, please.
Okay. One of the other important topics that comes up a lot in my work with leaders, and it's something that I think is actually a deficiency in the training of psychoanalysts, at least in the United States. I don't know about in Latin America. But we are taught so much about the psychology of individuals. We're taught so much about the mind, the individual motivation and behavior. What we don't get much training in at all, at least I didn't, was any training in group dynamics, or not nearly as much. And I have been learning a great deal about group dynamics in my work over the years. I'm self-taught. So one example, for instance, that is important for leaders is that leaders often don't understand the fact that their role, even if they're a nice person and they try to be open and listen to people, they don't understand that their role has an inhibiting effect. It's one of the problems of authority, is that it has an inhibiting effect on those around them. There is a reluctance to speak openly to people in positions of authority and power. And one of the important aspects of my role is to help leaders reduce the effect, or at least be aware, and then reduce the effect of their role on the communication to them. Does that make sense?
Entiendo. Creo que me quedó very clear. Un problema, una deficiencia de muchos de los líderes que hace... bueno, él primero habló de la deficiencia de formación psicoanalítica, del training, en donde, por lo menos en Estados Unidos, todo apunta a la psicología y al psicoanálisis en cuanto al tema individual. Hay poco estudio en el training, y lo considera muy complicado, de la psicología de los grupos. Y entonces, eso por un lado, respecto del training. Por otro lado, él encuentra que el problema de los líderes en general es que no tienen capacidad de comprender hasta qué punto su liderazgo puede inhibir la comunicación de ellos con las personas que trabajan con ellos. Es decir, tienen producen una inhibición y por lo tanto una falta de respuesta, digamos, de las personas que rodean a los líderes para que se comuniquen con ellos.
Thank you. And one of the things that I saw early on in my work is that this problem is something that psychoanalysts actually understand a lot about, because psychoanalysts understand transference. Really what we're talking about is a problem of transference, the transference to authority. And it's very helpful to bring a psychoanalytic perspective about that to my work with leaders. I'm just giving this as one example of the kind of issue that comes up all the time in my work.
Bueno, la ayuda fundamental, digamos, en cuanto a conceptual y, digamos, que trae el psicoanálisis para comunicarse y para trabajar con estos líderes, es el rol central que tiene la transferencia en los vínculos que ellos tienen con las personas con las que trabajan y sus followers, por decir así, sus seguidores. Entonces, tener en cuenta la transferencia y poder explicarla y ponerla de manifiesto con estos líderes, digamos, que se sienten aislados, digamos, del resto, es fundamental en el trabajo con ellos.
Okay, so I'm going to move a little faster into the present now. This is background. So I have been doing this kind of work now for about 25 years. And at the beginning, as I told you, people thought that I was making a big mistake. And as it turns out, it's worked out well. And the idea of applying psychoanalysis now to working with leaders and organizations of all kinds has become much more popular, much more accepted within the field of psychoanalysis. And during this whole time, as I was growing my business and continuing to work with leaders and getting involved in the human rights movement, as Abel mentioned, I also remained very involved in the American Psychoanalytic Association. And that was really my professional home.
Durante 25 años, Kerry está trabajando en esta en su especialidad de ser un advisor en grandes compañías para los CEOs, y esto poco a poco ha dejado de ser un campo ajeno al psicoanálisis. En estos 25 años cada vez más han aceptado, digamos, esta rama del psicoanálisis como una rama verdaderamente importante, y por otro lado, además, Kerry ha estado siempre envuelto en temas de derechos humanos y en APSA, digamos, en la Organización Americana de Psicoanálisis, que él considera su verdadera casa.
One of the most important experiences two of the most important experiences that I have had have been in APSA. Many years ago, about 17, 18 years ago, I was asked to chair the Committee on Public Information of APSA, which was really speaking to the press about psychoanalysis. And as Abel mentioned, also, I've done a lot of teaching at the medical school about bringing a psychoanalytic perspective to young psychiatrists. And I learned so much about how to translate complicated psychoanalytic ideas into plain, simple language. And I must say, many psychoanalysts are not very good at that. And many psychoanalysts speak with a lot of psychoanalytic jargon, and they understand each other, but the public doesn't understand what they're talking about.
This is very important, Kerry, what you're saying. I will translate it. Como miembro de APSA, Kerry fue convocado para dedicarse a la información pública, es decir, hablar con los medios y hablar también para un público que no era especializado en psicoanálisis, y sobre todo hablar con psiquiatras también, en donde también lo que ocurre es que muchos psicoanalistas no aprenden el idioma de hablar fácilmente hacia los que no son psicoanalistas, y hablan en una jerga que lo hace incomprensible, y esto entonces va bastante en desmedro de la difusión del psicoanálisis. Okay.
So that for me, that was a big advantage, which was just being able to speak in plain language about psychoanalysis. And it helped me in business, it helped me in my teaching, and it helped me in working with the press. And so I stayed involved with APSA over the years. I was friends with almost every president of APSA, and they always called me for advice on some of their challenges, their leadership challenges. Because another thing most psychoanalysts don't really know much about is how to run an organization, how to lead an organization. They're very good at working one-on-one with patients, but they're not necessarily comfortable working in a group setting.
You're touching a very sensible aspect. Lo que dice Carrie es que poco a poco él se fue transformando en una persona muy consultada en APSA y en las instituciones psicoanalíticas, porque lo que ocurre normalmente es que las personas que tienen que dirigir instituciones psicoanalistas son excelentes psicoanalistas, pero no personas acostumbradas a dirigir una organización. Y muchas veces lo han llamado para que los ayude a comunicarse, digamos, en función de ese rol organizacional con la gente y con el público también externo a esa organización.
So, thank you. I can understand maybe every 2 or 3 words that you say. So I'm trying to follow you. I speak French, but not Spanish.
Okay. So yeah, you understand that I'm more or less hold your idea.
It sounds good. It sounds very good.
Sounds good. Okay.
So after many years of being involved in APSA, I chaired different committees and I was an advisor to different presidents of APSA informally. I was really honored about a year and a half ago when I was asked if I would be interested in running for president of APSA myself. It was a big honor and a big surprise.
Well, I think it's a good choice for them. Bueno, después de haber sido advisor de una cantidad enorme de presidentes de APSA, que es la Organización Americana de Psicoanálisis, una de las dos, la más importante, bueno, ha sido convocado para ser el mismo presidente de APSA, que lo que ha sentido obviamente como un honor, ¿no?
Yeah. So I said yes, and I ran for president. My opponent is a friend of mine. He's a very nice guy, and I said very publicly at the beginning of the election that if I wasn't running myself, that I would vote for my opponent.
Bueno, is this something that happened? This happening now? Or it happened in the past?
The election was no, it was last year. It was last fall. The election results were in February. They announced the election was in February.
And now you're the president of APSA?
So I'm the president-elect. I'm the president-elect.
President. Okay. Well, I don't know if it was said in your curriculum, no me acuerdo. Bueno, en realidad, Kerry es el presidente electo de APSA. I think that there's overlapping, no? Then you come, then you like in IPA, ¿no? Es el presidente electo de APSA. Hubo una elección y el que se oponía a él era un amigo. Entonces él le dijo que si no fuera porque él mismo está teniendo este rol de competir por la presidencia de APSA, votaría por su amigo. Pero evidentemente fue elegido Kerry y ahora no sé en qué momento va a ser efectivamente tomar el rol del presidente.
Yeah. So I was very fortunate and very honored to win the election. I won 75% of the vote, and it's really for me a labor of love because I love psychoanalysis, not only because I've had a good and interesting career, but frankly because psychoanalysis has been very important, very helpful to me personally at different times in my life.
Bueno, Kerry ganó con el 75% de los votos, lo cual parece, digamos, una elección casi de una gran mayoría, y se siente muy honrado después de haber hecho este recorrido, digamos, por toda la trayectoria organizacional, volver, digamos, a sus raíces de psicoanalista y poder unir ambas aptitudes, el de ser psicoanalista y el de ser un especialista en liderazgo, ¿no? It's a very good choice. They are lucky to have you.
Well, that's nice of you to say that. We'll see. It's too early to say that. Yes. Well, what happened is that I also thought that my experience with organizations, my experience with leadership, my experience being both inside psychoanalysis and outside psychoanalysis could be helpful. One thing that I did not anticipate, of course, is that 1 month after the election results were announced, the pandemic began and the world changed.
Okay, you will be a kind of leader in, well, I don't know what will happen, no, nobody knows, but en realidad Kerry ganó la elección un mes antes de que se declare la pandemia y entonces ahora, bueno, cuando él, esto ha cambiado completamente la visión de las instituciones y de lo que se va, de cómo van a evolucionar las instituciones después de la pandemia, ¿no?
Yeah.
¿Cuál va a ser
It
el
has
liderazgo? Would it be concretely the kind of leadership you will have to be after this, no? What the kinds of activities, what will happen with all our work, no? Lo que pasará con nuestro trabajo.
So that's the last thing I wanted to talk about before we open up to discussion, if that's okay. Okay. So I have been working very closely with Bill Glover, who's the current president of APSA, and I'm the president-elect. We're good friends. We talk to each other every day, and we have been extremely busy. It has been the busiest and in some ways the most interesting 5 months of my career, very different than what I expected, because within 1 month of becoming president-elect and Bill Glover becoming president, the entire membership of APSA had to switch to working virtually, and we were really managing an organization in crisis.
Okay, that's what's happening to us also, no? It's very interesting for the presidents and for the ones that are leading now the organizations. We transform everything into Zoom, and bueno, es lo que dice Kerry, es que un mes después, digamos, se empezó a trabajar muy cercanamente con Bill Glover, que es el actual presidente de APSA, y fueron meses muy apasionantes y sobre todo por la transformación que nosotros también vivimos de todo el trabajo institucional en forma virtual. Es decir, en este caso es toda una región, digamos, de cantidad enorme de instituciones que ha empezado a trabajar virtualmente.
So maybe, Claudia, maybe I should stop at this point and see what kinds of questions, because there are many, many things that we can talk about, and I'd rather see what people are interested in.
Okay, then Analia, if you want to take the translation of the ones that come into English.
Yes, sure.
Tenemos algunas preguntas del grupo de la Asociación Psicoanalítica Argentina. Tenemos mucha gente que nos escucha que no son psicoanalistas y queríamos preguntarle a Kerry qué piensa de los liderazgos tan diferentes que tenemos en el mundo contemporáneo, porque él él habló que es el líder y el contexto. Entonces, ¿alguna reflexión de él respecto de los liderazgos contemporáneos?
Yes. Abel says that a lot of people listening who are not psychoanalysts, and he wants to ask what is the difference between psychoanalytic leadership and other leaderships and in the contemporary world.
I think that some people are asking, especially about your ideas about Trump and Bolsonaro.
I'm sorry, you just froze. About some people asking, I didn't hear the end of the question.
Especially about Trump, Donald Trump and Bolsonaro, no? The kind of leadership and the kind of context that they, I don't know if estaba en las questions, Abel, esto.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Not only Trump and Bolsonaro, but also Angela Merkel. We have good leaders.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's a really interesting and complicated question, and we could talk for the next 2 hours about this. Let me say a little bit more about leadership and about the application of psychoanalysis to looking at leaders of countries. Obviously, Trump is, not my patient. I think that's, I can easily say that. Same thing with Bolsonaro. I think that one of the reasons why psychoanalysis is so useful in applying it to questions of leadership is because, and why psychoanalysts are actually so qualified to help leaders, is that I think there is such a thing as psychoanalytic values. We don't talk about it very much in our profession, but I think there are some very real values in our profession. And what I mean by that is the value, and I'm not going to think of them all, but the value of careful listening, the value of empathy, the idea that the past informs the present, the idea that trauma shapes us and that it is important in everyone's life in some way or another and to varying degrees. The idea of the value of childhood and that children are people. And so I think these are distinctly psychoanalytic values. Let me start with that.
Está hablando de la importancia del psicoanálisis aplicado a los liderazgos, si bien él no es el analista de los líderes, pero él en realidad quiere hablar de la importancia y por qué es importante aplicar el psicoanálisis para ayudar a los líderes. Y se refiere particularmente a los valores que tiene nuestra profesión. Sobre todo el valor de la escucha psicoanalítica, de la empatía, la idea de que el pasado fundamenta el presente, la idea de que el trauma nos modela, la idea de infancia y de que los niños son personas.
Thank you. So, what is good leadership and what is destructive leadership? From a psychoanalytic perspective, we might say that destructive leadership is when leadership is in the hands of a pathological narcissist or in the hands of something who is a sociopath. And if you remember my definition earlier, my very simple definition of leadership earlier, that leadership is the capacity to inspire followership. When I teach leadership, I ask my students, give me examples of some of the most well-known and most powerful leaders in history. And they start with Barack Obama, Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King in the United States. And then somebody invariably mentions Adolf Hitler. And that's a very interesting issue because Hitler was able to inspire a lot of followership. So by this very narrow definition of leadership, you could say that Hitler was an effective leader. But then it immediately raises what I think is the most important question, which is there a moral dimension to leadership? And to me, the answer is yes. There is a moral dimension to leadership.
Bueno,
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I can hear your papers. Go ahead.
Bueno, él habla de la utilidad de la perspectiva psicoanalítica para diferenciar un buen líder de un líder destructivo y se refiere justamente a que un líder destructivo tiene que ver con lo que llamamos un narcisismo patológico o un sociópata. Él recuerda la definición que dio de leadership, de liderazgo. Liderazgo es la capacidad que tiene alguien de inspirar seguidores. Entonces, cuando él enseña a los estudiantes y pide algún ejemplo de líderes en la historia, inevitablemente surge Barack Obama, surge Gandhi, surge Martin Luther King, pero inevitablemente alguien menciona a Hitler, a Adolf Hitler. Entonces, si nosotros nos limitamos a la definición sucinta de liderazgo como la capacidad de inspirar seguidores, Adolf Hitler sería un líder. Pero enseguida también surge la discusión acerca de si hay una dimensión moral en la idea de liderazgo, si se aplica una dimensión moral. Y Kerry inevitablemente cree que sí.
So another important thing that I want to say about the question of applying psychoanalysis at a distance to leaders is that everybody, I think, understands that this is a controversial activity. And the controversy is interesting. And I don't want to spend too much time on it, but just to mention, there is I don't know if anybody on this call is familiar what is in the United States is referred to as the Goldwater Rule. Is that familiar to anybody?
No. No.
Okay, let me explain. It's actually a really interesting and important issue. In 1964, when Lyndon Johnson was running for president against somebody named Barry Goldwater, Lyndon Johnson, of course, won the presidency and was president after Kennedy was assassinated, and he won another election after. But in 1964, during that election, there was a magazine, a popular magazine that did a survey of American psychiatrists and asked them what they thought of Barry Goldwater. And a lot of them thought that he was not qualified to be president because they thought that he had a paranoid character. And he lost the election. And after the election was over, he sued the magazine for
Bueno, sí. Kerry dice que es controversial, digamos, la aplicación del psicoanálisis al estudio de los líderes es controversial. Él dice que hay una regla que se llama Goldwater Rule, que tiene que ver con algo que sucedió en Estados Unidos en 1964, cuando Lyndon Johnson estaba corriendo para la presidencia con Goldwater, y bueno, había una revista, la revista de psiquiatría, que hizo una encuesta, ¿no es cierto? Fue publicada la encuesta que realizó la Asociación Americana de Psiquiatría, que publicó que Goldwater no estaba calificado para ser presidente porque tenía un carácter paranoico. Por supuesto, bueno, sabemos que Goldwater perdió la presidencia y después demandó a la revista por lo que había publicado.
He sued the magazine and he lost the suit, and they awarded him $1 in damages. But the effect of this lawsuit was profound because the American Psychiatric Association, not the Psychoanalytic Association, but the American Psychiatric Association, came up with what became known as the Goldwater Rule, which basically said two things. One, they said that psychiatrists should not make a diagnosis at a distance of somebody who you haven't examined as a patient. That the only time you could make a diagnosis was if you had examined the patient in your office. And the second part of the Goldwater Rule is that if you had examined somebody in your office, then for reasons of confidentiality, you were not permitted to disclose the diagnosis. The effect of this rule was to basically say that mental health professionals should not talk about public figures, politicians, or anyone else in public. And it was like putting a muzzle on the mental health profession.
Bueno, el importe que hubo que pagar por daños fue $1, pero sin embargo los daños fueron muy importantes, que se pueden sintetizar en esto que se llama la regla Goldwater. Primero, se estableció que los psiquiatras no deberían hacer diagnósticos a distancia, es decir, los psiquiatras no pueden hacer diagnósticos sin examinar a los pacientes. En segundo lugar, si si un psiquiatra examina a un paciente, ya sea un político o cualquier paciente, por regla de confidencialidad no se puede desclasificar esa información. Entonces, de alguna manera se puso como una traba en los profesionales de la salud mental respecto de la posibilidad de hacer diagnósticos a figuras públicas.
So I wanted to give that history because 4 years ago, when Donald Trump was running for president of the United States and after he was elected, this Goldwater rule that I was describing became a big topic again, because it seemed obvious that there was something important that mental health professionals, psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, and psychoanalysts had to say about our new president.
Bueno, esta historia es importante porque 4 años atrás, cuando Trump fue elegido, la regla, la Goldwater Rule, volvió a ser un tema de importancia para los trabajadores de la salud mental, tanto psiquiatras como psicólogos, trabajadores sociales, porque bueno, era evidente que había algo para decir respecto de esto.
I think this is particularly important for psychoanalysts to think about, because psychoanalysts especially, I think, are less interested in making a diagnosis. That's really what psychiatrists spend their time doing, who are not psychoanalysts. But psychoanalysts are really more interested in describing and understanding, especially understanding human behavior. I'm less interested in saying he has this label or that label, but more in understanding how and why they are the way they are, and also understanding the effect that they have on their followers. And this is something that I think psychoanalysts are uniquely qualified to talk about, even though when we talk about that, we risk being in violation of this old rule.
Bueno, esto es importante particularmente para los psicoanalistas. Los psicoanalistas estamos menos interesados en hacer diagnósticos que los psiquiatras y más interesados en entender las conductas humanas, por qué y cómo son, cómo han llegado a ser como son, y los efectos que tienen sobre sus seguidores, a pesar de que corremos los riesgos por esta traba impuesta por la regla Goldwater.
So I realize this is a very long answer to the question about Trump and Bolsonaro, but I think it's important to think about this context in the idea of applying psychoanalysis at a distance, not to make a diagnosis, that's less interesting, but to understand the phenomenon at an individual level and at a group level. I do think that Donald Trump and Bolsonaro and there are a number of other leaders are deeply disturbed, but they're also symptoms of aspects of society that give rise to them. These people did not become president of the country by force; they won elections, and so there are enough people who unconsciously, I believe, resonate with their kind of leadership that allows them to take power.
Bueno, él dice que bueno, que es una respuesta bastante larga, ¿no?, a la pregunta sobre Trump y Bolsonaro, pero que era importante dar cuenta del contexto acerca de, bueno, de las dificultades de aplicar psicoanálisis a distancia. Sin embargo, cree que es muy importante entender el fenómeno tanto a nivel individual, de lo que tiene que ver con los líderes, como a nivel grupal, en el sentido de que no solo son líderes que están perturbados, que tienen perturbaciones, pero también el estudio de las sociedades, porque son líderes que no ganaron por la fuerza, sino que fueron elegidos, con lo cual inconscientemente, de alguna manera, resonaron con estos líderes.
Yeah. So let me offer one observation about Trump. Obviously, I know more about Trump than about Bolsonaro, since Trump is my president. But maybe this applies to Bolsonaro as well. With Trump, there are two, broadly speaking, there are two categories of people who have supported Trump and who elected him. And this is, I'm reducing something, making it more simple than it really is. There's one group of people who supported Trump not because they like Trump, but because they saw Trump as somebody who would help their economic interests. They kind of hold their nose and vote for Trump. That's one group. People who don't like him at all, but think he would be good for their business or their economic interests or whatever. But there's another big group of Trump supporters, the ones who are the most emotionally involved with him, who are people who come from disadvantaged parts of my country, people who feel that they have been ignored, left behind, excluded by the elites, and who have been suffering for a long time. And they see in Trump, and I think a lot of this happens on an unconscious level, which again is why psychoanalysis is so important in understanding this. They see in Trump someone who can get around the ordinary rules, not only of the law and of society, but of the conscience. In other words, Trump circumvents the superego in a way that these people are unable to do. He circumvents the superego, the rules of society, and the rules of the law. And they see in him somebody who is admirable and who is an ideal, an ego ideal. And the more he does that is outrageous, and the more things that he says that are racist, on an unconscious level, that he feels more like them, and they love him for that. So the more we criticize Trump, the more he feels like the victim to them, and they identify with his victimization.
Bueno, él puede hablar sobre todo de Trump, porque es su presidente, pero piensa que tal vez lo que dice se puede aplicar a Bolsonaro. Entonces, diferencia, él dice que va a ser un reduccionismo, que es una simplificación, pero que básicamente hay dos categorías de personas que votaron a Trump. El primer grupo es un grupo al que por ahí no les gustaba Trump, pero que lo votaron porque pensaron que los iba a ayudar económicamente. En realidad fue un interés básicamente económico para ellos y para sus empresas. El segundo grupo es un grupo que tiene mucho que ver con, digamos, con una lectura que podemos hacer los psicoanalistas. Sería el grupo más emocionalmente involucrado, y dice que este grupo son personas que vienen de lugares desventajados, que se sienten excluidos, que sienten que han sido desplazados o no tenidos en cuenta por las élites. Y ven en Trump inconscientemente, por eso el psicoanálisis tiene mucho que decir, porque estos procesos son inconscientes, pero ven en Trump a alguien que podría cambiar las reglas de la sociedad, del super yo, y lo ven como un ideal del yo. Entonces, cuanto más desencajado, cuanto más racista, digamos, cuando Trump dice cosas que por ahí para nosotros están absolutamente fuera de lugar, estas personas se identifican más con él. O sea, a medida que lo que estas personas viven como las élites, criticamos a Trump, estas personas, este segundo grupo de votantes, se identifican en esta posición de víctima.
So maybe I'll stop there. We could talk so much about Trump. I'll stop on that question with that question. But if there's more, I'm happy to talk
Thank
about
you.
anything.
Thank you, Kerry. José Carlos Calich, de Porto Alegre.
Ok, gracias, Abel. ¿Me escuchas?
Sí, perfecto.
Ok. Kerry, lo que me gustaría entender, porque hay algunas cosas en la historia de la humanidad que muestran que los líderes tienen muchas características narcísicas, son muy narcisistas en general, y dominan al grupo de una manera con manipulaciones, con alguna especie de mentiras, con muchas especies de artefactos que lo hacen líderes. Y eso es la historia de la humanidad. Me parece que es diferente que la persona tenga un rasgo narcísico o aunque sea algo aún más grave, y la capacidad que él tenga de hacer cosas que organizan la sociedad o no. Y quería escucharte sobre eso, porque algunos líderes son muy narcisistas, pero organizan la sociedad, hacen cosas que hacen con que la sociedad pueda crecer, y otros por veces ni son tan enfermos y no hacen cosas, no son buenos líderes porque no hacen las cosas. Entonces, me gustaría entender esa diferencia entre ser líder y ser útil a la sociedad, porque me parece que eso es una diferencia conceptual importante.
Okay, I didn't understand the question.
Sí. Bueno, he said that he would like to understand certain things in the history of leadership in humanity. He says that certain leaders are very narcissistic in general, and they dominate the group with manipulations, with lies, with artifacts that make them leaders. He says that it's different, that a person has a narcissistic trait and the capacity to make things to organize society. He makes a differentiation between these two things. One thing is the narcissistic trait, and the other thing is to be able to make useful things for society. He says that there are some leaders that are very narcissistic, but they organize society. They make useful things for society to be able to grow. And he says that there are others that are good leaders, but they don't do useful things for societies. So he wants you to enlighten on this difference.
Yeah, it's very interesting. First of all, I agree with his observations, although I'm not sure I understand one thing that Jose Carlos said. I would argue that that if good leaders, what he's describing as good leaders, don't do something good for society, then they're not such good leaders. Because I don't think that the definition of a successful leader is simply the ability to get a lot of people to follow him or her. I think that it's actually in the tasks that they perform for whatever organization or society that they're leading that they are ultimately judged, not simply in their ability to mobilize people to follow them. So I think it's an important point. I think it's in what leaders do ultimately that they're judged rather than in how many people they can get to follow them.
Sí, lo que está diciendo es que en realidad lo que describe a un buen líder es lo que hace por la sociedad, no, o sea, las tareas que un líder realiza, no la capacidad de movilizar. Es decir, que un buen líder no se define por su capacidad de movilización o por su cantidad de seguidores, sino porque hace buenas cosas para la sociedad.
What I would add to that is another definition of good leadership that might be helpful in answering this question. I like to think about definitions not because there's one final definition that is the the last answer, but because I think it helps to be more rigorous in our thinking. And another definition that I like about leadership is that there are two functions of leaders, and they have to do both.
Yes,
Can-
yes,
Now, yes?
it's okay.
Okay.
Yes, you were talking that there are two functions in
Yeah.
leadership.
Yeah, and I was saying there are two functions, and I think it's interesting to think about this from a psychoanalytic lens. One of the functions of a leader is to define reality for their followers. And I'll explain what I mean by that, but let me just state both of them. The first is to define reality for their followers, and the second is to give hope. Okay? These are so important, but they have to go together. They can't be one or the other. A leader needs to be rooted in the reality of the circumstances in which he or she is leading. You know, a good example of how not to do that, for instance, is the way that Trump has led the United States during the pandemic. You know, he's not in touch with the medical reality of the virus, and you know, he's telling people to do crazy things to treat the virus, or he says that the virus is going to go away in 2 months when the weather gets warmer. It's crazy. So he's not. So a leader has to be very firmly rooted in reality. But as we all know on this call, sometimes reality is very unpleasant. It's very difficult. It's hard. So the second part of leadership that I think is so important is to give hope to the followers. If a leader only does the first thing, if they're just talking about the difficult reality, it's very depressing, and people don't want to follow a leader like that. On the other hand, if a leader just does the second thing, if they just give hope, but it's not connected to reality, then they're just talking about fantasies. That's what Trump does. That's what Trump does. He tries to give hope, but he's not connected to reality. On the other hand, if a leader can do.
Bueno, now we cannot hear you, but I will take advantage for the translation. Okay. If that's okay.
Yeah.
We can't hear you, so I translate these two functions of leadership, and then you continue, okay? Bueno, lo que dice es que puede ayudar ampliar la definición de liderazgo. Él dice que las definiciones ayudan a tener algún rigor, si bien por ahí un poco cierran, pero que ayudan. Entonces él lo que dice es que, y acá viene también una perspectiva psicoanalítica, que hay dos funciones del buen líder, digamos. La primera sería definir la realidad para sus seguidores, y la segunda sería dar esperanza. Entonces, él lo que dice es que estas dos definiciones tienen que ir juntas. La primera tendría que ver, o sea, la posibilidad de que un líder defina la realidad para sus seguidores, tiene que ver con estar enraizado en la realidad y en las circunstancias. Por ejemplo, Trump en la pandemia no estuvo o no está en contacto con la realidad médica del virus. Entonces dice cosas locas, dice que la gente vaya a la playa. A veces la realidad es muy difícil, es muy dura, y eso hace que sea muy difícil que el líder continúe en contacto con la realidad. Ahora, si solamente hace esto el líder, si solamente está en un contacto con la realidad y la realidad es muy dura, eso es deprimente y la gente no quiere eso. Entonces acá viene la segunda función, que es la función de dar esperanza. Entonces, un líder también tiene que dar esperanza. Ahora, si solo da esperanza, si no está enraizado en la realidad, son puras fantasías, como volvemos al ejemplo de Trump. Por eso, estas dos funciones hacen a un buen líder y tienen que estar unidas.
Maybe another question. Answer the question. Maybe take another question.
Pregunta por si hay otra pregunta.
Sí. Del Grupo de Buenos Aires, queríamos preguntarle por qué pensaba que lo habían elegido presidente de APSA y qué decía el hecho de que hubieran elegido a un psicoanalista que no se dedica actualmente a la clínica como presidente, ¿qué dice eso del psicoanálisis contemporáneo, ¿no? Que se elija un presidente que no se dedica a la clínica psicoanalítica.
So, Abel asks, what do you think of the fact that you were chosen president to the APSA regarding the fact that you are not at this time having a psychoanalytical practice in your office? And what does this fact say about contemporary psychoanalysis?
Yeah, that is a really interesting question. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? So
Good.
my good friend Abel is asking a question that I have thought about a lot. I think that while I can't be sure why I got elected president of APSA, I think that APSA, like a lot of other psychoanalytic organizations around the world, has had a lot of internal problems. I think that the psychoanalytic world, which is wonderful and which I love, has also been in some ways its own worst enemy. And I think that that one reason why I may have won the election is because I think some of our members recognize that we need to fix ourselves as an organization and as a profession, and that the idea of you can't just translate an understanding of individual behavior, which most analysts are very, very good at doing, to understanding the behavior of a large group. And I think psychoanalysis has gotten in its own way in terms of the way it's perceived in the public, in the way it's perceived by other mental health professionals, the way it has, I think, lost a certain amount of currency in the academic and intellectual world. And I think that we need to be thinking about the outside world a lot more. And I think that may be one of the reasons why I have the opportunity to lead the association, because of my interest in doing that.
Bueno. Bueno, dice que no está demasiado seguro de por qué lo eligieron, pero que lo que él piensa es que APSA, como muchas sociedades, ha tenido muchos problemas internos. Y lo que dice es que él considera que para los psicoanalistas el mundo psicoanalítico puede ser nuestro peor enemigo, y que cree que algunos miembros de APSA reconocieron que nosotros, los psicoanalistas, nos tenemos que arreglar a nosotros mismos, que tenemos que modificar o transformar algunos aspectos de nosotros como profesión y como profesionales. Dice que no se puede traducir directamente la conducta individual a la conducta grupal, entonces una cosa es dirigir una organización y otra cosa es ser un buen psicoanalista. Hay muy buenos psicoanalistas que tienen dificultades en estos temas. Y otra de las cuestiones que para Carey hay que modificar o transformar es cómo los psicoanalistas somos vistos por otros profesionales, por otros colegas del campo de la salud mental y también del mundo intelectual y del mundo académico, es decir, cómo interactuamos los psicoanalistas con el mundo externo. Y él cree que fue elegido por su interés en estas cuestiones.
Our psychoanalysts I love psychoanalysts, and they like to argue, they like to fight with one another. They fight about things like, what is psychoanalysis? Is it psychoanalysis can it be psychoanalysis if it's 3 times a week, or does it have to be 4 or 5 times a week on the couch? Is it psychoanalysis if we are sitting up, or do we have to be lying down? Is it psychoanalysis if it's on the internet, as opposed to in the consulting room? And those are interesting questions in some ways, though I'm not that interested in those questions. I think that psychoanalysis is, in my mind, something that is defined by a process of deep exploration between two people, the analyst and the analysand, the analyst and the patient, a joint adventure in exploring the mind of one person using the minds of two people coming together. That to me is psychoanalysis, but I think we should move on from trying to set up so many rules about what is psychoanalysis and think about the way that we talk about psychoanalysis to the outside world, and think about the way that we speak to patients and prospective patients, the way we speak to leaders, the way we speak to teachers and to government officials. I think that we can be so helpful in so many ways, but if we use what I would describe as a social defense, it's a group defense mechanism, because we're afraid of dealing with the outside world or we're uncomfortable with it, we turn our aggression, our frustration inwards at each other and start fighting with each other about 3 times a week or 4 times a week. And we slowly destroy our own profession that we love.
Bueno, él aclara que ama el psicoanálisis y ama a los psicoanalistas, pero que a los psicoanalistas les gusta demasiado discutir sobre qué es el psicoanálisis, si psicoanálisis es 3 o 4 veces por semana, si psicoanálisis es si nos sentamos, si psicoanálisis es si nos acostamos, si es por internet o si es en el consultorio. Entonces dice que bueno, que son intereses posibles, pero que él no está interesado en estas cuestiones. Para él el psicoanálisis es un proceso de exploración profunda entre 2 personas, una aventura conjunta de exploración de la mente de una persona a través de la mente de otra. Dice que tantas reglas parece que no han servido y que lo importante es pensar cómo hablamos del psicoanálisis al mundo, a los maestros, a los posibles futuros pacientes, a los líderes, a las personas que están en el gobierno. Y dice que para él este mecanismo de meterse para adentro y discutir entre nosotros es un mecanismo de defensa grupal que lleva la agresión adentro de nuestras mismas instituciones o asociaciones, y corremos el riesgo de destruir nuestra profesión, él dice, la profesión que tanto amamos.
Thank you. Sergio o Claudio, ¿alguna pregunta de Brasil? De Porto Alegre, perdón.
Están las de Facebook también.
Sí, después hacemos 1 o 2 de Facebook y terminamos.
No, para mí está bien, podemos pasar para el Facebook. No sé si Claudio gustaría. No, Claudio tampoco.
Bien.
Podemos pasar a Facebook.
Jorge.
Sí, ¿qué tal? Buenas tardes. Bueno, en Facebook digamos que hay como 3 tipos de preguntas, básicamente. Una que se refiere a los liderazgos tanáticos y a la moral. Otro es en relación a los tipos de liderazgo. Y hay una tercera en relación a una articulación entre psicoanálisis y liderazgo. Le voy a leer una síntesis en inglés a Kerry y como para darle los 3 grupos de preguntas. In the social network, there are 3 kinds of questions for you that people have asked. We got right now 126 people watching. And there are 3 groups of questions. One of them has to do with the destructive leadership and how this destructive leadership can be understood psychoanalytically in relationship to historical, group, and psychosocial framework. That's one group of questions, right? It could be interesting to take malignant or evil narcissism and its incidence on subjects, groups, and peoples. Can you clarify the issue of leadership and morals a little bit? How is it possible to think about this form of psychoanalytic perspective? Then there is a second group of questions in relationship to psychoanalysis and media. What do you think about psychoanalysis in the mass media? Is there supposed to be a kind of training for psychoanalysts who are supposed to be in the mass media? And then there is a third group of questions in relationship to different kind of leaderships. And is there a difference between female and male leadership? What do you think is the most important difference? And besides that, what kind of leadership is what distinguishes a leader in a psychoanalytical association? Sorry for that. That's a lot. But we got like 100 questions. I tried to do 3 groups of them, right?
Kerry, we have 10 minutes to finish. Then that's for you.
Okay.
As a magician, please.
Let me more concisely, because those are great questions. I think I'll work backwards. First of all, on the question about women leaders and male leaders, that's a very interesting question. I have done some work with political leaders, and I was talking to a well-known senator in the United States who was a woman, and I was talking to her when she was running for re-election last time she won. She's really good. And I said to her, you know, what do you think we should do about the problems in Washington? Washington is so dysfunctional. And her answer was immediate, which was elect more women. And I think she's right. And I think that while it's of course impossible to make complete generalizations about women leaders and male leaders, there are some bad female leaders and there's some obviously very good male leaders. But I think that to the extent that we can generalize about that, I think that women probably have a greater capacity, and the leaders that I've seen, women leaders have a greater capacity for empathy than some of their male counterparts. I think their narcissism takes a different form, and I think that it's a healthier kind of narcissism. So I think that it's not a surprise to me that you have Angela Merkel in Germany, you have the leader of New Zealand, and a number of other leaders who are really the best leaders in the world right now. And it's not a coincidence that they're women.
Bueno, él toma esta cuestión, va a empezar de atrás para adelante y va a tomar la cuestión de la diferencia entre las mujeres y hombres, en el liderazgo entre mujeres y hombres, y él cuenta una anécdota de una mujer que se presentaba senadora a reelección en Washington, y él le preguntó por qué Washington es tan disfuncional o qué se puede hacer con esto, y la mujer le dijo, tendríamos que elegir más mujeres. Y él dice que sí, que él considera que las mujeres tienen más capacidad de empatía, que su narcisismo requiere una forma diferente, que es más saludable, y que entonces no es sorprendente tener en este momento líderes como Angela Merkel y la líder en Nueva Zelanda, y que bueno, que en este momento las mejores líderes son mujeres.
On the subject of psychoanalysis and the media, if I understood the question, I'm not sure I did, but I think the question is about should there be special training for psychoanalysis and dealing with the media? Is that the?
Not only that, it is what role should psychoanalysis play on the media? Because you mentioned it. How is it supposed to be in the media, and what kind of training psychoanalysts should have, is supposed to have one, when they're at the media?
So, you know, in the popular media, psychoanalysts aren't present very much. When they're in the media, they tend to take 2 sort of stereotypical forms. One is of the crazy psychiatrist, who's sort of a mad person, and that's not very helpful. And the other image of the psychoanalyst in the media which is, I think, very helpful, is when psychoanalysts can speak in plain language, like I was trying to describe before, and who can serve to help explain what's going on. People want to understand unconscious forces around them. People want to understand things that seem to be irrational. And psychoanalysts are very qualified to do that as long as they can speak in plain language. And I keep emphasizing that point, which leads me to the issue of training. I think that psychoanalysts, maybe not everyone, but the ones who are interested, should get training in how to speak to the media or to write for the popular media. Writing may come more naturally than public speaking, and that's fine. But there are so many opportunities for psychoanalysts to reach the public directly. And as long as they speak in clear, plain language, not only is it good for society, but it's good for those individual psychoanalysts who do it because they become more well-known, they become more accessible, they get more patients that way, they build their practices that way.
Bueno, dice que sí, o sea, retoma la pregunta acerca del psicoanálisis y los medios, y dice que sí, que para él debería haber un entrenamiento. Él dice que en los medios populares hay dos imágenes de los psicoanalistas. Hay una que no ayuda para nada, que es la imagen del psiquiatra loco o del psicoanalista como una persona loca, y esa imagen no ayuda. La otra imagen que sí ayuda es cuando un psicoanalista habla en el lenguaje simple, en el lenguaje cotidiano, que explica en términos simples lo que la gente no entiende, lo irracional, lo que produce angustia. Y dice que piensa que sí, que debería haber un entrenamiento, que los psicoanalistas deberían entrenarse para hablar o para escribir para los medios, y que eso da muchas oportunidades para llegar al público, y que eso es bueno tanto para las sociedades como para los psicoanalistas, que pueden hacerse conocidos e incluso construir su práctica a través de este trabajo en los medios.
Thank you.
Si Kerry se quiere despedir y lo cerramos Sergio y yo.
Kerry, if you want to say goodbye, or you just let Abel and Sergio close.
Well, I thank you very much for speaking with me for the last 2 hours. I apologize for all of the technical problems, and I apologize for my lack of speaking your native languages. But it was a pleasure to be with you and an honor to be with you, and I hope to have a chance to speak with you again.
Él dice que fue un honor, que fue muy placentero conversar con nosotros, que pide disculpas por los problemas en la conexión y se disculpa también por no hablar nuestros lenguajes nativos, y bueno, que le gustó mucho esta conversación y que espera tener oportunidad de volver a hablar con nosotros.
Sergio?
Sí, también quería agradecer a Kerry. Es una oportunidad de discutir estos temas tan importantes en nuestra actualidad y que no tenemos mucho el costumbre de los discutir. Entonces, agradecer y decir que fue una satisfacción contar con él.
Bueno, Sergio says that it's been a pleasure to hear you, and that we do not have the chance to talk about these subjects very often. And so he's very happy to have been able to have this chance.
Thank you.
Bueno, yo quería agradecer, por supuesto, a Kerry, a las dos sociedades, a la APA y a la Sociedad de Porto Alegre, a Claudia y la directiva, y a José Carlos y la directiva, y por todo el apoyo que nos dieron para esto. Y me gustaría agradecer muy especialmente, como dijeron al principio, a los traductores, a Claudia, Analía y Jorge, que trabajaron mucho, y muy especialmente a Guillermo Amor, que es nuestro técnico, que es, digamos, el alma mater de estas traducciones. Y a todo el personal de la APA que colaboró para esto.
Bueno, Abel wants to thank the two societies and the commissions of the societies who organized this activity, and very especially to translators and to Guillermo, who helps us with the transmission, and without him, none of this could have been possible.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Okay, thank you very much.
Bye bye.
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 Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Everybody.